Well, hello again, YouTube. I'm speaking quite quietly because it's 6:30 in the morning. It's still dark outside, as you can see through the window, and it is, yes, another wet day in the north. And I really wish it wasn't, because today I have to take the DIY EV apart, fix it, and put it back together again. On its last trip out last Saturday, it developed again the dreaded squeak. And if you watch the first video, the intro, you will know that means that the coupler's somehow come out of alignment and is grinding on one shaft or another, either the shaft from the motor or the shaft from the gearbox, and needs at best re-greasing, but probably realigning. I suspect that actually a couple of bolts have come a bit loose, and hence it's wobbling around a little bit. And so maybe I could get in there and just tighten those bolts up. But actually access is really bad when everything's in there, and so instead what I'm going to do today is take it all apart, which means that you get to see inside both the good, the bad and the really ugly, the bits I'm perhaps not so proud of. Well, still proud that I got it to work, but things I really want to redo. This isn't the video I wanted to do. I wanted to be doing one about upgrades rather than repairs, but you know, you work with what you've got. And I really got to get this done today, even though it's raining, because I need the car. That wasn't the plan when I built it. It was just meant to be a fun thing, but the nature of family life, kids have complicated and diverse hobbies. For a very brief period on a Saturday, we do need two cars because public transport just can't get us to where we need to be at the right times. So I've got today to fix this car. I've got, as part of my day job, a radio interview at 7:20, about 40 minutes or so, and then I'm recording an episode of Tim Lovejoy's podcast, The Lovejoy Hour, at 4:15. So that really bookends my day. I've got from about 7:30, 8 o'clock until 4 o'clock at the absolute latest to take the whole car apart, fix the problem, put it all back together again in the rain in yet another wet day in the north. Right, it's now about 20 to 9. I've spent the best part of 40 minutes clearing up space in the house, put things so they don't get wet. I'm making a cardboard rain shield for the camera so that it doesn't get drenched while I'm out here. It's not pouring with rain, but it's pretty unpleasant. And so yeah, time to get the car up on jack stands. I've stuck the car as close to the house as possible for two reasons. One, this is about as flat as I can get it on my very unlevel driveway. And two, I'm hoping that the bush and the house provide me a bit of shelter combined with the bonnet so I can get things in and out without getting too wet. At the moment the car's actually so low that I need to jack it up with the old jack before I can even get the trolley jack underneath. There we go. I don't spend much time under it, it's really just so I can get better access to bolts at the front. So I'm not going to be crawling around under there very much. At least I hope. So the next step, down here, the next step is to disconnect some of the wiring and make it easy to take the bumper off, and the lights out, and the charge port out, and you know, all of that. Might be a bit early for sponsorship, but you know, Makita, I'm here. Obviously I didn't forget to disconnect the battery first. probably tell from me using a torch, it's still pretty dark out here. One headlight out. Rain's getting heavier. Let me just apologise now if you get a flash of my butt while all this is going on. Nice crusty old trim screws. Didn't need to do that. What I actually need to do is start disconnecting the high voltage stuff. You'll notice I'm not wearing big safety gloves. That's because I'm not touching anything that's remotely bare. These are very, very closed, sealed connections I'm going to undo now. And I'll be doing it with one hand behind my back, at least. Well, it's the equivalent of a safety squint for high voltage, I guess. What I'm doing here is just taking the lid off the charger so I can disconnect this, which is the charging cable. Then we can pull the front bumper off. That's the right way to do it, not trying to disconnect it from the front, because it doesn't actually fit through the hole. Right, time for my least favourite bit. ATF. I hate doing with ATF. I ended up getting bathed in it a lot of times throughout this project, and it's horrible stuff. Stinks. I showered and you can still smell it. Oh, it's horrible. Now, before I take all this apart, quick view behind the bumper. So in the middle there is the oil cooling system, a little fuel pump. Oh, can I get my finger on there? A little fuel pump. The old power steering reservoir from the Z3, and a little oil cooler, which run back to the motor. Here I've just unbolted the pistons that mount the bumper, the shocks that mount the bumper rather. And that's pretty much all that's holding the front valance on now, unless I've forgotten some bolts. So pull those two out, lose all the washers all over the floor, and then then I can get to the battery box. Right, just before I take all this apart, next step, remove the batteries. I can't lift the battery box out in one go, or I could if I got my engine crane out, but don't really want to. So instead I'll take these modules, these BMW FEV modules out individually. You can see, a bit like Jamie's if you watched the last video, things aren't quite as tidy as I pretend they are in here. This is my BMS down here, and this is my BMW safety box, which has been slightly modded to be my high voltage junction box. So I'll get all these cables out, get these modules out, but first I'm going to label them, because last time I did this I forgot, and they are actually handed, so you have to put them in the right way around. lifting, what I'm now left with is an empty battery box. This case was made from recycled steel from a washing machine. Well, it does have some reinforcing struts in the bottom to which basically the original BMW battery box is mounted to give us the location point for each cell. As you saw from all those screws coming out, there are some long M6 bolts holding all 5 modules in, and then holding the base plate which secures the S-box and the BMS. So now that's all out, this is now liftable, and the battery box can come out and reveal the motor. Of course, I forgot about some bolts. Right, the weight of the battery box sits on this bit of subframe here, and if I can focus without a lot of space, I've doubled up these nuts on here to stop it coming undone. So I need to undo those, and then the battery box can come out. All the way down here. Right, pull out a screwdriver, and I should now be able to take this out, at least part of the way. Still got some connections to undo. So what you can see here is the DC line, so the high voltage running from the battery box up to the inverter. Inverter's been off and disconnected for ages, so those capacitors in there should be completely discharged. So I can unbolt these, disconnect that, and then work from there, because getting my hands in behind the inverter at the moment is a recipe for lots of cuts and grazes, and stripping this thing down and rebuilding it in 8 hours is already hard enough. Right, so now finally, with the battery box out of the way, we can actually see the source of our problems. This motor just here. It's now it's at 10:45. I've been at this for 2¼ hours now. Once I actually got started. Rain's coming and going. It's been off for a little bit, fortunately, while I was taking the battery box apart, but now it's getting heavier again. All the tools are going to need a good dry off. So yeah, next step is actually to take these bits out. So I'm going to drain the coolant from the cooling loop, which goes through the inverter and the charger. So disconnect one of these, pour off as much coolant possible. Probably this one actually, it's nice and low off the Bosch PCE pump down here. Going to drain off as much coolant as possible, and then disconnect the wiring for these two and pull those out. And then once those are out, I can actually chock the motor underneath against the subframe and disconnect the mounting brackets and motor mounts and pull all that out. And then finally we take the motor out and have a look at that coupler. The nice thing about actually being in the engine bay now is that the bonnet is keeping me a little bit drier. You can see here my nice little old PC fans keeping the radiator reasonably cool. That's the main amp seal connector. T4 way, I think, I can't totally remember, that goes to the inverter. So that carries signals for CAN bus, carries power to the inverter and 12 volt power, and also controls for all the contactors as well in the pre-charge system. Cover off. Underneath we've got the 3 phase connections for the motor, and then 2 DC bus connections into the charger, which all need to come off. One inverter. Ouch. Oh, balls. This here, the output of the DC to DC converter. That's what charges up your 12 volt system. Built into the Outlander, Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV charger. Also taking a feed there for the power steering pumps over here in the corner. Thankfully we do not have to remove today, which requires quite a lot of juice. So that's the meaty 12 volt stuff disconnected. On the back we have this slightly awkward signal line, which is actually buried by the coolant, so I'm going to buried by the coolant pipe, so I'm going to take that off first. And that, unless I've forgotten anything, should be the charger. Ouch. I'm very wet. Right, we're getting right back to it now. So you can see the mounting frame. This is what the inverter and charger sit on. You can see the brake booster pump back here. The ABS system, power steering pump, mounted on some nice flexible mountings so it doesn't transmit too much vibration to the frame. You can now see the cooling pump a bit better. The Bosch PCE pump here is mounted on a, okay, not very well mounted, it seems, on a 3D printed bracket. Maybe that's, well, okay, that's a lot looser than I thought it was. That's interesting. Could be some of the clonking coming from there, that moving around. And you can see the motor and some pink stuff on it. Very mild pink, which is why I wasn't too worried about running off the coolant. Which is coolant. I've clearly got a little bit of a coolant leak still running off. You can see the signal connections from the motor down there for the temperature sensor and, more importantly, the resolver. You can also see this motor's not enormous. Perhaps part of the issue with regards to performance. So next step, unbolt, so chock the motor first, get some wooden blocks under there so that it can't go anywhere, and unbolt this, and then we can hopefully unbolt the motor and slide it out. So far, I have to say I was expecting to find a little more movement in the motor. I was sort of hoping to be honest, in that would explain the squeaking, because otherwise it means my alignment's off even without things moving around, which is, you know, not good. That's all looking pretty solid so far, so it may be just a question of lubing up the coupler. Originally I had captive nuts here, didn't weld them very well. They're not so captive anymore, which makes this part of the process kind of tricky. watch off before I ruin it. Right, engine mount bolts off. I would say all of those could have been tighter, but none of them was loose. You always forget one cable tie, or in this case, two. Right, properly back to basics now. The motor and the adapter plate. Things I'm not particularly proud of in this build. First of all, the adapter plate. It is made out of some very agricultural 8mm steel. It weighs an absolute ton. I frankly made a bit of a mess of it. It was the first welding I'd done on this project and didn't do a great job. And it works, but it's not brilliant, and I'm looking forward to redoing that with the new motor at some point down the line. Reservoir for brake booster, not currently in use. Sensor for the brake booster, not currently in use because the control board that I had didn't blow up but failed. I'm not particularly happy with the mounting of the brake booster pump either. Not very accessible, hard to do anything with where it is. So in a future video, I hope you'll see me with the new adapter plate and all of this rearranged. But for now, let's check the bolts on the motor and then get that motor out of there. Right, let's get socket on these bolts. Oh, okay, that one's not loose. That one is a bit loose. That one's loose. That one's missing entirely. Okay, this is encouraging. Maybe that's what's caused the squeak. Nonetheless, we'll get it off, get it all greased up. And there we have it. So, I can't actually see. I was expecting that to still be very greasy. Look, very greasy. I'll grease around the bottom there. A couple up. Is well and truly wedged. I'm hoping you're not getting a bit of butt cleavage from me. Never had a problem getting it out before. I'm not sure this is going to come out. Alright, this coupler does not want to come out. It will wiggle, but not withdraw. So what I've done is I've just used the Dremel to turn a bit of wood down to make a bung, tapped a hole in the end, or rather drilled a hole in the end. I'm going to try and hope this wedges on the inside of the coupler. The screw hits the it's the shaft of the gearbox and it pushes it out, we shall see. Of course I stopped recording at exactly the wrong moment. Slide hammer did it. Used one of the sort of screw-in bits with my wooden bung, and eventually a couple came out. Oh, so if I can withdraw the slide hammer, which might need a vice to get it properly out, you can see that. I don't know if you can see. Still looks pretty greased. There are some signs of wear, but pretty minor really. I can't see any. It's hard to see obviously with the copper grease in there, but I can't see any grains of steel. I can't see any misshapenness. So I think for now, grease it up, put it all back together. Replacement, as they say, is the reverse of removal. But first I need some lunch. Right, time check. It's 1 o'clock. I've had some lunch. I'm a bit drier. Rain's holding off for now. Long may that continue. I've lost about 3/4 of an hour at my schedule by that coupler not coming out, maybe even an hour. It took a long time to finally get it out with that slide hammer. So I've now got 3 hours. 3 hours time I need to be slightly cleaner, dry, dressed and ready to go for Lovejoy's podcast. And yeah, best get on with it really. But first, tea. First up, let's get that motor back in. But first, even before that, let's lube up that coupler. I'm using copper grease. No, let's not sit down there. Sit down there. I'm using copper grease. I've been advised to use molybdenum grease. Don't have any yet. When I do the new motor, Paul, who advised me, promised I'll switch to molybdenum grease. But this is what I've got for now. No point being shy about it. Now, there's the locating pin on the front of the motor which should take the weight rather than the coupler. Just got to get it all to align. Easier said than done. Right, navs and bolts. Right, done swearing. The mounting brackets, or the motor mounts, whatever you want to call them, back in. and all nipped up tight. Time to start on the big stuff. So inverter, charger, and then battery box. You're just staring at my back, aren't you? Right, as you can probably tell, I'm flagging a bit. Been on the go for 6 hours straight trying to put this car back together. Nearly there, so battery box going back in, which means a lot of lifting. Need to refill the cooling system. Need to reconnect the oil cooling system. Hook up the HV. And then a bunch of little cable ties, finishing off bits, stuff like that. But getting there. May not finish it all by 4 o'clock. Sorted. So I didn't quite get things done on the Thursday, but I did manage to finish things up on the Friday. As you can hear, no nasty squeaks. Car's running fine. Managed to do its dad taxi without issue. And yeah, all good. So I didn't quite hit my own self-imposed 8-hour target, but quite happy with it. Quite happy that I got it done in maybe 10 hours all in, once everything was buttoned up. And yeah, it's running beautifully. So, next video, I promise there will be upgrades. I'm not quite sure which one I'm going to tackle first yet, it's partly dependent on weather. But I've got the new motor ready to go. A rear motor from a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, so chunkier than this one, should be a bit more torque. I want to redo the wiring, which is a bit of a mess at the moment. Quick U-turn, because the road's blocked. Got cooling upgrades to do. Need to get automated charging sorted. so that I can just plug it in and leave it rather than having to plug in a laptop. And yeah, lots to talk about really. So if you did like this video, forgive me for the length, trust me I edited out an awful lot. But please do like and subscribe. And yeah, follow the next steps on this very silly DIY EV journey. Cheers!